Welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of WORKOLOGY.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of WORKOLOGY.
As we head into this new year, change is an important part of our business plans and strategies. The question is, how do we ensure that we can create a company culture that encourages and welcomes change instead of trying to avoid it? A recent survey by Robert Half found that executives believed that what's important when leading a company through a change was communicating clear and effectively, followed by managing expectations. This clear communication accounted for 65% of the responses and managing expectations only 19%. With my guest today, we'll be talking about how to be an organizational leader that welcomes change, how best we can transform our organization, and where we begin. Jay Coons is the Vice President of Healthcare Strategy at Kinetics. He's one of the most, and this is my opinion here, but it's true, innovative senior HR leaders in the industry, as well as healthcare, and I have been looking forward to this conversation all week. Jay, welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Is there anything else in your background that maybe you want to share? Cool stuff? Weird things?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the quick soundbite. Prior to joining Kinetics 2 years ago in our healthcare practice, I spent the majority of the previous 20 years as an HR executive in hospitals and health systems. So I kind of joke that I'm a one-trick pony. Healthcare is my thing. But one of the things that helped connect me and the team at Kinetics was that I really went through a massive personal change relative to how I was a leader and adopted very contemporary social and digital strategies and built that not only into our talent acquisition process, but just our whole HR culture. And that's what really helped align me when it was time for me to take that next step and make a big change in my career, leaving hospitals after 20 years and join the team at Kinetics. So great topic for me because it's literally my life. So I'm excited to chat with you today.
Well, and I will say that one of the things that I love about you, and I have been following, we met on social media many years ago, but is that you're a senior leader in an organization, and now you consult with those senior leaders, but you're able to just do so many interesting and different things that really impact the organization differently. So I think that you have, and that's what I want to get to today, is some sort of secret sauce about how to drive change in an organization, because I think that, especially in HR or operations, it is sometimes so hard because we're not a revenue center necessarily to be able to make a large organizational change.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there are many, many, many HR leaders, and I meet with them in the work that I do today. I meet with them when I'm speaking at conferences across the country, who are motivated to adapt new tools. They want to change a few things, either about their own, what I call leader brand, not just their personal brand, but their leader brand within their organization as well as their industry. But they are so confined and almost trapped. So there's this desire, there's this curiosity. They see all these trendy companies making changes and achieving success, and then they come back to their organization and it's traditional culture, very risk averse, and HR is often the no police, right? No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. So it's almost like they're not destined to fail, but they're set up to fail. And so for me, I decided to align when I was the VP of HR at a hospital in Tampa Bay, and a specialty children's hospital. And one of the motivating factors for me was I realized we had a lot of needs, particularly in the talent space, and we needed to change how we worked as an HR team. And I needed to match those needs with the realities of our business. So I started to drop a lot of HR jargon. I stopped worrying about HR policies. I stopped worrying about how they had always done it there, about what is our core business. HR is not the core business. Policy consistency is not the core business. Paranoia about external interference is not our core business. For me as a healthcare practitioner, healthcare HR practitioner, my core business was making sure I supported the team that made the children well. And so I have used this vision of a young patient, 3 or 4 years old, beautiful young girl, laying in the bed in our hospital, and on the outside of her body was her artificial Berlin heart. Her heart was so bad, she had to have an artificial one. So she's laying in the bed, beautiful smile, and on the outside of her body is the heart that's keeping her alive. And she's waiting for another child to pass and hopefully have that child's heart match so she could have a heart implant. And so when you look at that child and you say to yourself, we have all these staffing needs and doing traditional HR is not working, you say to yourself, it's time to change. You have to. It's not because you're comfortable doing it, but for me, that was one of the defining examples of why the change needs to happen. So the secret sauce for me was really driven by the operational reality of my organization. I just harnessed it as kind of the engine that drove me to try some contemporary strategies.
Wow, I can see the picture in my mind. That'll motivate you to make a personal or professional change, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's say that someone is looking to make a change, maybe in their department or the entire organization. Where do you think that they should get started?
So for me, if we carry that example through, that example typifies the operational reality of the organization, and your listeners can insert their own operational reality, whatever the need is. But I had to be able to execute that within HR at first and then branch that out to the rest of the hospital. So for me, it started with my team. And so I started to lay out some expectations for the team that we were not going to use traditional approaches anymore. And it wasn't me asking them, I just told them. So I stopped using a lot of print. This sounds archaic, but people still do it a lot. I stopped using a lot of external consultants who were collecting money but weren't adding any value. And probably the most important part of this was I started practicing using the tools. I don't have time to try these new strategies, Jay. I don't have time to use these tools. I'm so busy in my job as an executive or a manager or a director, but I've instructed my team to do it. So we're going to launch these things, and I just tell them, I say, well, that's going to fail. That you are telling people to start using tools that are going to represent your company. They're going to be on the internet, and as I like to joke, the internet has a certain permanency to it. So if you're not going to be a practitioner, this is going to fail. And I knew this going in. When I had kind of this epiphany, I said, a year from now, our team will be required to use social tools. In 1 year, you will be required. If you're uncomfortable with it, you have a year to get comfortable. I am going to spend the next year testing and trying and doing all these things. So I embraced social media. I embraced blogging. I embraced leveraging content and telling stories differently than the competition in my market. And because I worked for a specialty hospital, we had a lot of national level competition. So that was a little bit of an extra challenge. But that starting the change was me. If it's an important enough change that I'm investing some time into it, then the team will pay attention and will follow. But if you just start promulgating, go change, I'm too busy to change, but you all need to change, that will fall flat. And those leaders typically end up being moved out. They're so old school. I call them dinosaurs. It's like, grab your policy. The world is digital. And if they're not going to be in the career space, the HR space, the employee communication space, then they're a waste of time. They're a waste of payroll dollars. There's a lot of people who are ready to fill those jobs who will be much more effective. So a couple of key points when we're talking about implementing this change. Linking the change that you know needs to happen to operations is absolutely essential, as in my little patient illustration I shared. So that beginning with yourself is essential. 2, mandating the requirement to use social on your team. Not asking people, not encouraging people, mandating that they use the tools. It just gets baked into their job. And if people have trouble with that, put it on their job description. Then it's required. Then suddenly it's okay. Whenever we put something on the job description, suddenly it's okay. When in doubt, get the paper out. That's the HR way, right? And the third one is once you as the leader have started using the tools, you've role modeled for your team that it's safe to use the tools, you require them, then you can start engaging other leaders in the organization. And I coach many, many executives today in a variety of hospitals on how to build up their own brand. We do a lot of things with LinkedIn, with Twitter, with automating content, good thought leadership, those sorts of things. So those steps are very helpful in helping to execute some of those changes.
Well, let's move on to question 3. And one strategy that I've seen work in the past, and I've used this myself, is to have an executive sponsor to ensure that you're going to have support, maybe when introducing or implementing a new program or a change to the organization. Do you think this strategy works, or are there others that exist?
I think it's an absolutely fabulous way to implement change, because at the end of the day, unless you're in a really, really unique corporate environment, most companies are still the traditional hierarchical, cling to their org chart boxes type structure. And one of the things that cracks me up all the time is that many HR leaders talk about needing to break down silos, and then in the next breath they grab their org chart paperwork. Well, the org chart is the silo factory. That's the blueprint. So that doesn't really work. So for most companies, having an executive sponsor is critical. And beyond just some of the traditional paranoia that gets in the way, executives have authority to make things happen. So if you have an executive sponsor, they can be your advocate to test different strategies, maybe launch a pilot blog to get some content out about your organization. Maybe have an internal blog so you can share success stories with all the employees, because it's so hard to collect all the great stories that are happening in any company. So how do we do that? Well, if there's an executive that says this is important for our culture, for our retention, to manifest our values in a real way, we're literally executing on that right now at Kinetics based on our employee survey work we've done recently. And we've developed 5 teams based on our employee feedback, and we have executives leading / sponsoring each one of those initiatives so that the employees get a very clear signal that we are committed, we are going to see this through and make it happen.
I feel like as HR leader or operations leader that sometimes, like you said, you kind of get in your silo or your box and it's hard to see your way out. But the executive sponsor route is such a great way, number one, to build a relationship with a member of the executive team. You know, you're having lunch, regular meetings with them, talking about business practices and operations outside of the human resource function. But you're also learning from them and growing, and they're learning from you too, so that you're in this together, because we are. HR is just one part of a much bigger puzzle.
Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We actually have some other projects going where we have a team working, and I am, as an executive with Kinetics, I am not actively involved in the work of the team, but I am coming in a consultative capacity. So that's another way. You know, an executive sponsor doesn't have to be the team leader or a member of the team. They can kind of bounce in and out just to provide guidance, almost in the way that a mentor-mentee relationship can play out.
Awesome. Well, let's take a bit of a reset here. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you're listening to the WORKOLOGY podcast. Today, we're talking about how to drive transformational change at your organization with Jay Kuhns, and you can follow Jay on Twitter at JRKUHNS. All right. I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that communicating effectively was one of the biggest challenges in change management or transformational change. What's your approach with that? How do we make for better communication about what's new, what's different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like the ultimate question, right? Because so many of the issues that come up in organizations, I think a lot of times have nothing to do with the decision that's been made, the promotions that have been made, the people that may have transitioned out, but it's that there's this absence of timely and clear communication around those issues that get people a little worked up. And I also work in an environment now where we have a very distributed workforce in my firm. So our corporate office is in Atlanta. We have recruiters in probably half a dozen states, and 2 of our 4 senior leaders live in states other than Georgia. And so communication, and we are growing very rapidly at Kinetics, so there's a lot of change management happening constantly. So we are forever examining this, and I'll give you a very practical example of one of the tools that's been very helpful, and that's implementing Slack company-wide. Slack is a great tool, very versatile tool, and it allows us to minimize email and maximize different channels for different topics. So we have a channel on Slack that is very official, formal company business that all employees need to be aware of. And we have a pretty funky culture at Kinetics, and so we also have another channel called Kick It Back, where it's more casual and fun and engaging in a non-work way, but creates a lot of banter. So that's a digital example. We have a lot of in-person examples as well. Our CEO does a weekly video to the employees, which we throw up on our private YouTube channel as a way to stay connected. We have weekly newsletters. So we use a tool called Sway. So we have a lot of different technologies and kind of old school approaches that in combination really help cover the bases for us.
I like that you're using different channels. So if you're not a newsletter person, you can get on the Slack channel, or you can look at videos and see the recent update from the CEO while you're picking your kid up from school, while you're waiting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she makes those very consumable, 2 minutes. So it's highlighting an employee, it's highlighting an app, it's highlighting a new client, it's highlighting a creative strategy. It's not intended to be the exact same message across all those channels. The really important messages will hit on a couple very consistently, but we also want it to be engaging for people so that it's you kind of look forward to the different things happening.
What advice do you have for someone in dealing with workplace politics? These seem to often be the barriers to change.
So I think for me, it's such a great question, and it's a complex set of issues that kind of coalesce into dealing with the politics. For me, there's some personal kind of self-confidence pieces that come along with that. Number one is I've gotten to a point on my life journey where I don't really get embarrassed anymore, and I'm really not afraid to bring up any issue. And so having those 2 personal barriers behind me has really helped when I need to cut to the chase, okay, or address an issue. So that's kind of like a personal component to dealing with workplace politics. Second layer of dealing with workplace politics is level of authority. Now, it's easier for me to address workplace politics as an executive than it would be if I was a first-line junior manager, right? Because you don't have the authority to deal with that. So there's an awareness of your role and your scope. I think probably the most important thing is to understand the dynamics. So if there are workplace politics issues that are playing out in a negative way, investing the time to understand what's behind that, understand who the players are to the best of your ability, really makes a big difference. And I think what's hard is we can quickly become frustrated or annoyed with another leader, with another staff member, if we feel like they're playing games. But if we get past kind of that human nature, we're writing them off because it's just politics, we'll hear that, it's politics, it's politics. It's almost a crutch for not taking action. Because there's politics, that's not an excuse to just let it continue. There's an opportunity to connect with everybody. You don't have to love everybody you work with, but there is a responsibility to connect with as many people as possible. That starts to break down some of the cliques and some of the political reality. And you as an individual may not solve the politics in your company. In fact, I would submit you won't. But you will position yourself effectively amongst all those other people in those little cliques or environments.
Tell me what you're working on right now. Is there anything exciting project-wise that you can share?
Yeah, I'm really pumped. I'm often fired up anyway, so that's not necessarily a new thing for today. But our healthcare practice at Kinetics has grown quite a bit. We now have we used to only have a very large client in Texas, and we now have clients in a bunch of states and different types of health systems. So that's kind of on a macro level very exciting. Some of the projects that I'm working on are a brand new employer brand podcast with one of our clients, kicking off a huge employee experience initiative that will run the gamut of candidate experience end all the way through life cycle of the employee to retirement. And how do we maximize that life experience for those people to be part of that organization? And this is a rapidly growing organization, about 13,000 employees now, and by 2020 or 2021, there'll be about 18 or 19,000 is their growth plan. So very aggressive growth plan, but very committed to culture, employee experience. And so really diving into that. Pumped about a little bit later this year, we're going to be doing some live video stuff relative to talent acquisition, employer brand content, Facebook Live, and Instagram. The video components to Instagram. So lots of really interesting things there. And so it's just really exciting to be doing some things that are, at least in the healthcare industry, considered very cutting edge. They're not necessarily cutting edge in other spaces, but as conservative industries go, not a lot of folks are doing this stuff yet. And so we've seen the metrics just explode when we roll out our content strategies and use these social strategies. They really make a big difference. So very exciting year ahead. I'm pretty pumped up.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thank you for joining us today. I know that you have a new website that people should check out, jaycoons.com, and cool new site with some great resources, more about you. But aside from that, where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so as you said, thanks for the shout out on the site. It's jaycoons.com, and also on Twitter at the letter J, letter R, KUHNS. And certainly a shout out to my awesome company, Kinetics, and our website is KINETIXHR.com. So thanks so much, Jess. Great time. Love it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and thank you, Jay, and thank you to you, the listener, for joining the Workology podcast today. This is a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader who is tired of the status quo. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and until next time, you can visit the newly launched and rebranded Workology.com to listen to all our previous episodes.
Production services for the Workology podcast with Jessica Miller Merrill provided by TotalPicture.com.
It's jkuhns.com, and also on Twitter at the letter J, letter R, KUHNS. And certainly a shout out to my awesome company, Kinetics, and our website is KINETIXHR.com. So thanks so much, Jess. Great time. Love it.